All right, here we are at day three or example three of how anyone can get started in real estate investing. Started this challenge here for the month of April 2022, which April is Financial Literacy Month, and wanted to challenge myself, but also educate my listeners and followers and viewers of different ways to get involved in real estate investing, and maybe some of them that aren't as familiar, maybe you haven't heard of before. So we've already touched base on two. You can touch base on real estate investment trusts that I covered in videos one and two. Today, I'm actually going to talk a little bit about syndications, and I'm going to go a little high level on this, but pretty much anyone typically can invest in a syndication. Now, what is a real estate syndication? Essentially, this is a grouping of investor money to invest in, say, a larger project that any one of them maybe could not get involved with in the first place. So, high level example, say there's I don't know, a $10 million apartment complex that's been distressed. Maybe there's some value add potential. Maybe the rents are below market, and there's a lot of upside that is seen. So a syndication is formed when there is one, a general partner, and then two, a limited partner or partners. So in a nutshell, the general partner is going to be kind of handling the day-to-day activities. They may have the expertise, they may have the connections for this investment, but they don't have the $10 million in their pocket. So that's where the syndication comes in. They bring in investors, the limited partners, into this, and all of them buy in a certain amount of it. So they might put in, a lot of syndications, it's minimum of $50,000, some 25. I've seen as low as $1,000. I've seen as high as a minimum investment of $200,000 and everywhere in between. So, like I said, with the general, $10 million valuation, let's just say that, I don't know, 10 million valuation that 10 investors get involved. So all 10 investors will have to bring 1 million to the table. 100 investors are involved. Each investor has to bring 100,000 to the table. And you can obviously work that downward to, even if you got 1,000 or 10,000 involved, then you're just talking a few $1,000s for every one of those limited partners to essentially buy a portion of that large project. So the limited partners come in, they basically put up the cash, but they are not involved in the day-to-day operations. They're not doing the swinging of hammers, lining up contractors, getting permits, doing inspections, walkthroughs, the leasing, the lease ups, et cetera, et cetera. That's all on the general partner and the general partner staff. And it's basically a combining of resources, time, knowledge, experience, but probably most important, money, to take down a large project that typically any one of those individual investors would not be able to do themselves. So that is very high level what a real estate syndication is. Now, taking a step back, there's two different types of real estate investing, real estate syndications. You may hear 506B and 506C. Now, what do those mean? Essentially, those are just relating to sections of the tax code and come with certain regulations that the SEC, or Securities and Exchange Committee, puts in place to, quote, protect investors. So, okay, what does all that mean? Easy way for I look at it is 506B is open for everyone. 506C means see you later unless you're an accredited investor. That's probably the easiest way I have come up with to think about it. So you see a 506C, you have to be accredited. If it's a 506B, typically the provider can take non-accredited investors or a certain number or certain percentage of non-accredited investors. Now let's take a step back again. Okay, we're talking about accreditation. What does that mean? At the time of this recording, and without getting into the nuances that came about in 2021, if you want to get certain licensing, for instance, as of the time of this recording, a accredited investor, if they are a single individual filing single, they're not married, has to have an income of $200,000 or more per year with the expectation that will continue on in the future. So if you're, I don't know, a sales rep that normally makes $50,000 and you just had a banner year and had a huge commission check of $150,000, you wouldn't really qualify because no, it looks like come 2023 or 2022, you're going to be back to $50,000. So there's the income threshold of that. Or you have to have a net worth of $1 million less the value of your primary home if you own it. And that's usually the big tipper that prevents a lot of people from being accredited. I think I read some stat that 300 million people in the US, only like 1,700,000, somewhere in there, were fit the definition of accreditations, because it is a kind of a high bar to fill. Now, like I mentioned, that's single. If you are married, filing jointly, then the income threshold bumps up that you and your spouse have to earn $300,000 or more per year with the expectation of that continuing on, or a combined net worth, you and your spouse, of $1 million or more, less the value of your primary home if you own it. So I don't know who came up with the descriptions years and years ago. There's actually talk that they being the government, the IRS, might be upping those limits, maybe net worth of 1.5 million, 2 million, who knows. But at the time of this recording, that is the benchmark to hit. Keep in mind the value of your primary home is the big kicker. So if you're in a state and maybe you're on the coast, or maybe you have a home that's worth $250,000, half a million, $1 million, whatnot. If your net worth is $1.5 million and you think, hey, great, I qualify, but your house is worth 750,000, well, $1.5 million minus $750,000 gets you to 750,000. So sorry, you're not accredited. And again, that is the value of your home. So if you have a mortgage on it, obviously the equity, even just a bare minimum $100,000 house, you got $75,000 debt on it, you have $25,000 equity. You can't just deduct the equity from your net worth and maybe you hit it then. No, it's the total value, whether you own your home free and clear, whether you're leveraged up to the nose, or somewhere in between. So that is the quick litmus test. Finding your net worth, what's the value of your primary home, deducting that, and if you're $1 million or more, or hit the income threshold, then you are an accredited investor. That is the test by the SEC. Obviously, that doesn't really get into much with the investor mindsets. Maybe someone only has a net worth of $400,000, but they're very, very good with their money and very knowledgeable in finances. Maybe they hit the accreditation rule. Off the top of my head, I can think of Nicolas Cage, who was worth millions and millions of dollars, blew it all on pet octopuses and castles and a Tyrannosaurus Rex skull, and I can't remember what else there was. So obviously the litmus test is basically just as a net worth or an income. Like I mentioned, non-accredited investors obviously don't hit that threshold, and you are free to invest in a 506B offering. Now, where it kind of gets into the details or nuances, if you come across a real estate syndication, maybe it's a program or a platform, and I myself have invested in numerous syndications, mostly through my self-directed retirement account, through Specialized Trust at this point. But obviously the ones that I invest in are 506B. I'm not an accredited investor. Hopefully one day I will be, but that's that's the way the rules are now. And as far as to differentiate, like, how do I know if this is a 506B or C? Well, the easiest is email the provider, contact the provider and say, hey, are you a 506B? Do you take non-accredited investors? In my experience, the majority of syndications only work with accredited investors. Why is that? Well, for starters, it may or may not be to the thresholds. I've seen minimums $100,000, $200,000, which not the average, the average American probably isn't going to have that amount available to invest, in or out of a retirement account. So there's the ease of paperwork. If I'm taking down $1 million property, it's a lot easier to get the paperwork, the K-1s, the 1099s, all the tax forms, the account setups, the portal, communications, etc., across 10 investors investing $100,000 versus 100 investors investing $10,000. So there's the paperwork, the simplicity part of that. Then there's the nuance of the SEC that if you're a 506B offering, hey, you can take non-accredited investors, but you can't advertise and you have to have a pre-existing relationship with the investor. And it seems like a catch-22. It's like, well, if I can't advertise, how do I get the word out to get investors? Which, kind of seems like an oxymoron right there. Obviously, it just comes down to networking, word of mouth, growing your network. Like I mentioned with the syndicators that I work with, took many years, dozens, if not hundreds of network connections from coast to coast, learning about other projects that, Julie knows Tanya, knows Mike, knows Todd, that is 506B syndicator, and I get connected. We establish a pre-existing relationship, and then I hit the requirements of being able to invest in a 506B, and the provider meets the legal definition of, hey, we have a pre-existing relationship now. I did not advertise this offering. This was through word of mouth, through my network, not through a Google or Facebook ad or anything like that. Stemming onto that with a 506C, obviously there's the simplifying of paperwork. If I only take accredited investors, if I'm a general partner of a syndication, but if I'm a 506C, then I can advertise because you want to get the word out. You want to get as many investors as you can. So then they just think, well, if you're advertising, we want to make sure you're only working with accredited investors. So typically, if you're scrolling through Facebook, LinkedIn, various social media platforms, or Google search, and you come across a XYZ real estate syndication invest now, click here. 99% chance that's probably a 506C. So just letting you know that. 506Bs typically aren't as well known, and that's where it comes back to the networking part of it. So kind of in summary here, way number 3 to get into real estate, especially if you want to be more of a passive investor, you don't have the time, the knowledge, the wherewithal, or even just the interest to deal with the day-to-day management, headaches, paperwork, permits, etc. of a new build, construction project, a rehab, whatever the case may be. You could be a limited partner in a real estate syndication. You put up the money, someone else is essentially doing the heavy lifting, and they give you a return, hopefully on a monthly, usually quarterly basis, and then a return of capital, typically 3, 5, 7 years down the line. So again, no, this is not a short-term investment. This is typically an illiquid investment. You'll want to do your due diligence on the provider, want to see if they have a track record, are they registered with the SEC, and I could go down the whole rabbit hole of due diligence for a syndication. But I just want to touch base on option number 3, or way number 3, that you can get involved in real estate is via a real estate syndication. With that, stay tuned for episode number 4.